The basement window gave way easier than Marcus expected, glass fragments catching moonlight as they scattered across the stone floor of St. Catherine's Church. His weathered hands shook as he pulled himself through the narrow opening, work boots landing softly on cold tile that had witnessed decades of reverent footsteps. The sanctuary stretched before him in shadows, wooden pews lined like silent sentinels guarding their secrets. Ornate stained glass windows filtered pale light across the altar where golden candlesticks gleamed with promise. His daughter Sophia needed another round of chemotherapy treatments, and the hospital bills were drowning him faster than he could steal enough to stay afloat. Marcus had broken into plenty of places before, but never a church, never somewhere people came to pray for miracles he had stopped believing in years ago. The familiar weight of desperation pressed against his chest as he moved toward the altar, each footstep echoing in the sacred silence. Something felt different here, heavier than just guilt or fear of getting caught. The life-sized statue of the Virgin Mary stood in the corner alcove, her marble eyes seeming to track his movement across the sanctuary floor, and Marcus found himself frozen halfway to his target, unable to look away from her serene face that somehow appeared more alive than any stone had a right to be. Marcus forced himself to look away from the statue and stumbled toward the altar, his hands reaching for the golden chalice that sat beneath the crucifix. The metal felt warm against his palms, heavier than he expected, and he tucked it quickly inside his jacket pocket. His fingers were already closing around a silver candlestick when a voice came, soft as a whisper but clear as thunder in silence. "My son, what brings you here in such pain?" The words seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, floating through the air like incense. Marcus spun around to find the statue, looking directly at him, her marble lips having moved with impossible grace. The serene expression remained unchanged, but her eyes held a depth of compassion that made his knees buckle. Father Miguel Santos emerged from the rectory door behind the altar, his dark hair disheveled from sleep, wearing only pajama pants and a wrinkled t-shirt. The young priest stopped dead in his tracks, his mouth falling open as he witnessed the impossible scene before him. The statue's lips moved again, the same gentle voice filling the sanctuary. "You carry more than you can bear alone, Marcus Rivera. Your daughter's healing does not require theft from my house." Father Miguel crossed himself instinctively, his theological training crashing against the miracle unfolding in front of his eyes, while Marcus dropped the candlestick with a clatter that rang through the church like a bell announcing the presence of divine mercy. Marcus staggered backward until his spine hit the wooden pew, his legs refusing to support him as the statue's words echoed in his mind. She had spoken his name, known about Sophia's illness, seen through his desperation to the broken father beneath. Father Miguel moved slowly toward the altar, his bare feet silent on the cold stone, his eyes never leaving the Virgin Mary's face as if expecting her to speak again. The chalice lay forgotten on the floor where Marcus had dropped it, gleaming accusingly in the moonlight. "How did you know my daughter's name?" Marcus whispered, his voice cracking like a teenage boy's. "How did you know she was sick?" The statue remained silent now, but the peace radiating from her marble features filled the sanctuary with something Marcus had never experienced before, a presence that made him want to confess every sin he had ever committed. Father Miguel knelt beside the fallen chalice, his hands trembling as he picked it up and cradled it against his chest. "I heard everything," he said softly, his accent thick with emotion. "She spoke to you, Marcus. The Blessed Mother spoke your name." Marcus felt tears he hadn't shed since Sophia's diagnosis burning behind his eyes, his pride crumbling like the basement window he had shattered to get inside. The Virgin Mary's compassionate gaze seemed to pierce through every wall he had built around his heart, exposing the terrified father who would do anything to save his little girl, even steal from God himself. Father Miguel helped Marcus to his feet, the priest's steady hands guiding him to sit in the front pew, while the weight of what had just happened settled between them like a living thing. Marcus buried his face in his calloused palms, his shoulders shaking with sobs he had held back for months. Sophia's medical bills sat in stacks on his kitchen table, each one a reminder that her cancer treatments were bankrupting him faster than his construction work could ever hope to cover. The chemotherapy sessions left her so weak she could barely lift her head, and the doctors had warned that without the next round of treatments, they were looking at weeks, not months. "I don't know what else to do," Marcus choked out between ragged breaths. "I've sold everything, borrowed from everyone, worked 3 jobs until my body gave out. She's all I have left in this world, Father." The insurance company denied her claim again yesterday. Father Miguel sat beside him, his young face etched with the kind of compassion that comes from witnessing miracles and human suffering in equal measure. "The Virgin Mary spoke to you, Marcus," he said quietly. "That doesn't happen by accident. She sees your pain, your love for Sophia, the desperation that brought you here tonight." Marcus looked up at the statue, her serene face now bathed in the first hints of dawn light creeping through the stained glass windows, and wondered if divine intervention came with a price he could never afford to pay. Word spread through the parish like wildfire by Sunday morning, despite Father Miguel's attempts to keep the miracle quiet until he could understand what had happened. Linda Thompson, the church secretary for 30 years, stood in the sacristy with her arms crossed and her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. A thief breaks into our church and suddenly claims the Virgin Mary spoke to him, she said, her voice sharp with skepticism. "Father, you're young and well-meaning, but this man is playing on your compassion to avoid criminal charges." Marcus sat in the last pew during morning mass, his work clothes clean but wrinkled, feeling the eyes of the congregation boring into his back like accusations. Some parishioners whispered behind their hands, their faces a mixture of curiosity and judgment, while others knelt in silent prayer before the statue that had somehow changed everything in a single night. The golden chalice he had tried to steal now held the consecrated wine, and Marcus couldn't take his eyes off it as Father Miguel raised it during the Eucharist. Dr. Patricia Collins sat 3 rows ahead, her medical mind struggling to reconcile her Catholic faith with her scientific training, wondering if desperate people could truly hear divine voices, or if trauma simply created auditory hallucinations that felt real enough to change lives. Marcus felt the weight of their doubt pressing against his chest, heavier than his daughter's medical bills, heavier than his own disbelief in miracles he had witnessed with his own eyes. Marcus drove home from Mass with his hands gripping the steering wheel, so tightly his knuckles had gone white, the congregation's whispers still echoing in his ears louder than the engine noise. Sophia was waiting for him on the couch, her small frame wrapped in the pink blanket his ex-wife had bought before she decided cancer treatment was too expensive for their marriage to survive. "Daddy, did you find the money for my medicine?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, her once bright eyes now sunken and ringed with the kind of exhaustion that belonged on much older faces. Marcus sat beside her and pulled her into his lap, her body feeling lighter every day, fragile as bird bones beneath his calloused hands. "I'm working on it, baby girl," he said, the lie burning his throat worse than whiskey. The appointment with Dr. Collins was scheduled for Wednesday, and without the next round of chemotherapy, Sophia's oncologist had made it clear that they were moving into palliative care territory. The Virgin Mary's words from that night in the church kept replaying in his mind, her promise that Sophia's healing didn't require theft from her house. But Marcus couldn't understand what she meant or how divine intervention was supposed to pay for medical treatments that cost more than he made in 6 months. The miracle felt like a cruel joke now, beautiful and meaningless in the face of insurance denials and hospital billing departments that didn't accept prayers as payment. Marcus found himself back at St. Catherine's on Tuesday night, not as a thief this time, but as a father who had run out of every option except prayer. He knelt before the Virgin Mary's statue, his work-worn hands clasped together in a position that felt foreign after years of relying only on himself. The sanctuary was empty except for the flickering votive candles that cast dancing shadows across her marble face, and Marcus whispered the desperate words he had never thought he would say. I don't know how to do this, he said to the statue, his voice breaking in the silence. I don't know how to have faith when everything is falling apart. Sophia gets sicker every day, and I can't fix it no matter how hard I work or how many jobs I take. If you really spoke to me that night, if you really care about my little girl, please show me what I'm supposed to do. The statue remained silent, but something shifted in the air around him, a presence that felt like being wrapped in his grandmother's arms when he was Sophia's age and believed in miracles without question. Father Miguel appeared beside him without making a sound, his young face gentle with understanding as he knelt on the cold stone floor. Sometimes faith isn't about understanding God's plan, Marcus, he said softly. Sometimes it's about trusting that love is stronger than fear, even when we can't see how the story ends. Marcus spent the next morning repairing the basement window he had broken, his hands steady as he fitted new glass into the frame while Father Miguel watched from the garden. The work felt different than any construction job he had ever done, each careful movement an act of repentance that somehow lightened the weight on his chest. I want to pay for the window and anything else I damaged, Marcus said, not looking up from his work. I know I don't have much money right now, but I can work it off doing maintenance around the church. Father Miguel smiled and handed him a bottle of water, the morning sun casting long shadows across the courtyard where roses bloomed despite the late season. The church could use someone with your skills, he said. Our heating system has been acting up, and Linda keeps complaining about the loose floorboards in the sanctuary. Marcus finished installing the window and stood back to examine his work, surprised by the satisfaction he felt in making something whole again instead of breaking it apart. The Virgin Mary's statue was visible through the new glass, her serene face watching over the sanctuary where she had spoken words that continued to change him in ways he was only beginning to understand. Dr. Collins arrived for her afternoon visit to pray before her shift at the hospital, and Marcus found himself asking if she needed help carrying the heavy medical textbooks she always brought to study during her quiet moments before the altar. The phone call came while Marcus was replacing broken tiles in the church vestibule, Father Miguel's voice carrying a note of urgency as he handed over the receiver. Dr. Collins was on the other end, her professional composure cracking with something between confusion and wonder. Marcus, you need to bring Sophia in immediately, she said, her words coming fast and breathless. The blood work we took yesterday shows something I've never seen in 30 years of oncology. Her white cell counts are normal. Her tumor markers have dropped to undetectable levels, and the scans we rushed this morning show complete remission. Marcus dropped the phone and sank to his knees on the cold tile floor, his body shaking as the impossible news washed over him like baptismal water. Father Miguel helped him to his feet, both men staring at the Virgin Mary's statue through the sanctuary doorway, her marble face serene as always, but somehow radiating a joy that filled the entire church. Sophia was waiting at home. Color returned to her cheeks for the first time in months, asking if she could go outside and play in the autumn leaves that had been falling while she was too sick to notice their beauty. The medical miracle had no explanation that Dr. Collins could offer her colleagues, no scientific framework that made sense of cancer simply disappearing overnight. But Marcus understood with perfect clarity that some healings required faith instead of medicine, grace instead of insurance coverage, and love that transcended every limitation he had ever accepted as unchangeable. News of Sophia's healing spread through the parish faster than Sunday announcements, bringing skeptics and believers together in the kind of unity that only miracles can create. Linda Thompson arrived at the church on Saturday morning with tears in her eyes and an apology on her lips, finding Marcus painting the exterior walls with careful attention to every weathered board. I was wrong to doubt you, she said simply, her voice thick with emotion. When I saw Sophia running around the playground yesterday, healthy and laughing, I knew God had touched your family in a way my old heart couldn't understand. Marcus set down his paintbrush and embraced the woman who had questioned his story, feeling her decades of faithful service to the parish in the strength of her grip. The church needs more than just maintenance, he said, looking up at the bell tower that had been silent for years due to structural damage. We should restore this place to be worthy of the miracles that happen here. Dr. Collins organized a fundraising committee while Marcus drew up construction plans. His experience in building homes translating perfectly to rebuilding a sacred space that had become the center of their transformed community. Parishioners who had whispered doubts now brought sandwiches for the work crews. Elderly members shared stories of their own encounters with divine grace. And children played in the courtyard, where Sophia's laughter rang like bells announcing that healing was possible for anyone willing to believe in love stronger than fear. The restoration project became something more than anyone had expected when families from across the city began arriving at St. Catherine's, drawn by stories of miraculous healing and a community that welcomed broken people with open arms. Marcus found himself counseling other desperate parents in the same pew where he had once sat alone with his shame, sharing his story of divine intervention with fathers who had run out of hope and mothers who didn't know how to pray anymore. A young couple named David and Susan brought their son who was facing the same aggressive cancer that had nearly claimed Sophia's life. And Marcus held their hands while Dr. Collins explained treatment options with the kind of compassion that comes from witnessing miracles firsthand. The Virgin Mary statue now stood in an alcove surrounded by fresh flowers and handwritten prayer requests. Her marble face somehow more radiant since the night she had spoken Marcus's name and changed the trajectory of his daughter's life. Father Miguel watched from the altar as Marcus taught David how to install new pews. Their conversation moving naturally from carpentry techniques to the kind of faith that sustains parents through their children's darkest hours. The church bell rang for the first time in 15 years, its bronze voice calling the neighborhood to evening mass, where Sophia sat in the front row, healthy and bright-eyed. A living testament to the truth that some promises are kept in ways more beautiful than human minds can imagine or human hearts can fully comprehend. 6 months later, Marcus stood before the Virgin Mary's statue every morning before work, not as a desperate thief, but as a grateful father whose daughter's laughter filled their home with the kind of joy that only comes after surviving the unthinkable. The church restoration was complete, its walls gleaming with fresh paint, and its pews filled with families who had heard about the miracles that happened when people brought their deepest pain to sacred spaces. David and Susan's son was responding to treatment better than anyone had dared hope, his medical team baffled by recovery rates that defied statistical probability. Dr. Collins had started a support group for parents facing childhood cancer, meeting in the church basement where Marcus shared his story every Tuesday night, his words carrying the authority of someone who had touched the impossible and found it real. Sophia helped distribute prayer cards after Sunday Mass, her bright smile and boundless energy proof that some healings change more than just medical charts and insurance claims. The golden chalice that Marcus had once tried to steal now held wine that tasted like forgiveness, and Father Miguel raised it each week with tears in his eyes, knowing he served a congregation that had witnessed grace transform desperation into hope. The Virgin Mary's gentle presence filled every corner of St. Catherine's, her promise fulfilled in ways that multiplied like loaves and fishes, feeding hungry hearts with the truth that love really is stronger than fear, mercy more powerful than despair, and miracles still happen for those brave enough to believe. Have you ever witnessed a moment when grace appeared exactly when someone needed it most, when divine love broke through impossible circumstances to heal what seemed beyond repair? Share your story of unexpected mercy in the comments below.